Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a video and podcast show that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Today, I'm delighted to have a young entrepreneur with me, Mr. Pravin Nath. Pravin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Not so young anymore, but I would still like to believe that I'm young.
Younger than me, much younger than me. So, Pravin is an engineer and an MBA. He's the founder and CEO of Ultragenic. And he was a professional manager and now a serial entrepreneur. So, Pravin, tell me a little bit about your early work and some of your learnings.
So, like many of us, did my engineering and did immediately after that decided to do my MBA, which was a decision we took at that time. Obviously, there were different priorities at the time. You had a choice to go and work. I did my mechanical engineering. The choice was to go and work for some time and then do an MBA. But then I said, all right, I'll just do an MBA right now. My dad could afford it. I said, fine, go for it. Opportunities there. So I did my MBA. And then I was privileged to join one of the finest organizations after that through campus, which is the Tata Group. I joined Tata Steel from there. And I think for a young professional, there isn't a better starting point in your career because the values that they kind of bring to the table is phenomenal. And you really learn to sort of graduate from, your typical college life to a professional one. And they teach you those basics there very well. So I thought that was a great I was just lucky to get that opportunity. So just spent time there a couple of years in the sales function. It was around 2000 when this whole .com and this e-commerce thing was booming everywhere. And every time and during your college, right, you were taught to sort of pick up the newspaper and I used to read Economic Times every morning. And every page you turn, front page, back page, it's all about e-commerce.
Correct.
So that had a massive, every morning it had an influence on me. It told me, look, am I doing what is relevant right now? So I said, all right, let me kind of go and explore this. And then I started applying to a number of companies, software companies. Nobody would listen to me because I was selling steel in Tata Steel. And of course, completely divergent. I had never done software, but I wanted to get into the space. So I just sent my CV to a number of CEOs and HR and nobody responded really. But there was just one CEO who just forwarded my resume to his chief operating officer. The chief operating officer thought that is a recommendation coming from the CEO. So he called me for an interview, and he really liked me. So since then, my journey in technology began.
Okay.
I was selling software for a little while, and then I realized that I don't know about software to sell it. Just don't know enough to go and have a credible conversation with customers. Because software sales is really very involved, right? You got to know what you're talking about. So I said, let me go back and actually spend time in the delivery function to see how software is made. So I joined Sapient, spent a little time there. Then, of course, I got this opportunity with a company called Relsys. The CEO had a successful company in the US. He didn't have an Indian operation.
Okay.
And this was a company that made software products for the pharmaceutical sector.
Right.
I'll explain to you a little bit. It's called drug safety. The domain is called pharmacovigilance or drug safety, which essentially ensures that patients, when they consume medicines, are safe, essentially. So medicines have two aspects, right? One is safety and the other is efficacy. Efficacy is whether it's actually doing the job. And you know that from your experience, obviously, that the safety aspect. So we deal with the safety aspect. Are the medicines safe when they are consumed? So that was a product that companies used to sell to pharmaceutical companies to ensure that they can track, process, and report side effects to the regulators, because it's a regulated industry. Everything goes to the regulators. So I got at about 5 years experience, somebody told me just go and set up the Indian operation. And he just went purely on, entrepreneurs go on gut a lot. They don't always go on sort of bookish experience or how many years you have under your belt and all that. He just looked at me, had a couple meetings. And then I went to the US and spent about 5 weekends with them to build a business plan. And then he said, fine, go and set up the Indian entity. So I did that and I was very young. But then because of the passion, the fire that I had, just because I thought I could do it. And that generated a whole wave of, attraction around us. And we created a very successful R&D unit between 2002 and 2008. That's why I spent time doing that. Then in 2008, I decided that I should move out and we looked at a big opportunity there again in consulting. This product was being bought by a lot of large pharma companies, but there was no ecosystem to support or implement these products.
Correct.
So I formed Foresight along with a couple partners in the US. And we launched and we grew that company from 2008 to 2018 to about 300 people. We clocked about $50 million revenue before we got acquired. by a company called IQVIA in 2017, 2018. So that's been my little sort of background, in terms.
Wonderful. So tell me, in the work that you have done so far, what would you say are the three key milestones in your career or life?
Sure. I think, if I look back upon it, the one thing was, when I was working at Tata Steel, it was a very comfortable environment.
Mm.
It's like a home, literally, right? You go in there, it's very comfortable. Your medical bills, your parents' medical bills, everything is taken care of, no questions asked. You get great accommodation. So it puts you in a comfort zone. But when I looked at, as I said, when I looked at what was going on in the outside world, when I looked at what I was doing, I thought I was sort of getting out of tune with the times. So it was a very tough call, and I would call it a milestone to just leave that job and join a real startup, which sort of a company called Netacross, which Manish Modi used to run, and Sanjay Jain was the CEO. They're really good mentors. I just trusted them and joined. But it was a big call. It was a big milestone for me, because if I hadn't done that,
Yeah.
I mean, for good or bad, I would have sort of continued nicely at Tata Steel and become a general manager and perhaps the CEO. I don't know, but
Mm.
I just didn't think the pace was something that was in tune with my
Yeah.
pace. So that was the only thing. Great organization, by the way. So that was one key milestone, I would say. The second key milestone was really accepting this challenge at Ralsys, which when the CEO said go and set up the India operation and 5 years experience, I had no clue what running a company means.
Mm.
But I just took the challenge, and I again trusted people. That when somebody is trusting you, I reciprocated the trust and said, fine,
Right.
I'm going to leave my other job and just come with you and do this. And the third milestone was really again moving and creating a whole new setup called Foresight after Ralsys, which was where I again left by the time that Ralsys was getting acquired. So I again left a very comfortable situation there, where I had put in 6 years, 7 years, and built great amount of credibility in that organization. To leave that again and get out of comfort zone once again,
Right.
and then do something else. So which again I thought was a big decision and a milestone for me as well.
Right. Wonderful. So let's move on and let's talk about Ultragenic.
Yeah.
This is something you founded. Tell me about the scope of work you do.
So that's that's something that's very close to, of course, my heart. What we do, as I said, when you consume, when medicines are made, patients consume medicines. Now, medicines come through a process of clinical trials, which is where medicines are tested in lab situations in a controlled environment, where you have clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and you test in a limited set of people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you can imagine, once a drug is launched in the market, it'll encounter many more scenarios. It'll encounter a bigger sample size. In the 60s, mid 60s, there was this drug called thalidomide, which when it was consumed by mothers when they were expecting, this was a drug for morning sickness. Now, nothing happened to the mother, but when children were born, they were born with deformities. So limbs which were not fully formed, and that's what led to this industry being formed, where we realized that there's a huge surveillance that needs to happen once the drug is sold in the market, and that's called the science of pharmacovigilance or drug safety. And it is in that science that we work in. Within that, we do consulting and software products to enable companies to do that activity, which is to capture side effects, process them within their company, and then report them to the regulators. And this whole thing is tracked so that you know what's going on in the market from a patient perspective.
Okay.
And that's why and we're now using, of course, having done that, we're using new technology now with, as you know, there's tremendous amount of technology power that we have today.
Sure.
With natural language processing, with machine learning and automation, to be able to do the same thing in a much better, fast, effective manner. Because the volumes have really increased. People have started consuming more medicines. You might imagine the situation right now, right? It's COVID times, and very soon in 6 months, every person on earth will have to have a vaccine once or twice or thrice. Now imagine the amount of side effects that's likely to produce.
Correct.
And so if you have to track that to make sure that nothing is going wrong with the drug, and if you need to make changes to your way of administration, or you need to make changes to the drug itself, sure, you got to go and do that. But this whole science tells you what to do and allows you to act. And that's
so when you talk about PV technology solutions and the fact that you're challenging the status quo, help me understand what this means.
When we talk about PV tech, right? So obviously the industry has evolved. Now there used to be a time when side effects used to be received only on faxes. and scan documents and through call centers. But today the channels have increased. People talk on social media. People have wearables where a lot of data is getting recorded. Hospital records are also an area where a number of side effects reside. Doctors report them. Literature, as you know, a number of literatures are published in the medical space,
Yeah.
and a number of side effects are sort of embedded within those literatures. And so all that, and then of course the social media side where people have become more informed. As you know, people first thing they do today is reach out to Google and check about the symptoms.
Correct.
As a result, and of course there's more social coordination amongst people. Earlier you never knew what's happening to somebody at the other end of the world.
True.
But today there are groups that are formed for specific reasons where people talk about ailments and talk about illnesses that they are having. Now, all this is a good source of information for this industry. So that's, it's telling you more. Our idea is to get more, because the more we know, the better we can react and the better we can serve the population going forward.
Correct.
Countries have developed. There used to be few prime markets. Now the markets are also many more markets are consuming medicines. China has become, one of the largest consumers of medicine. India is going to follow suit. Also, right, when countries develop, right, initially, of course, you are, trying to just make sure that you have medicines. Right. And then later on, you're looking at, the more regulatory aspects where you're looking at safety and such. So the point being that the amount of input data has, has increased exponentially. But technology has to keep pace with. Otherwise, how do you consume this data, and how do you make sense out of it? And therefore, new technology is coming into picture to be able to consume this high volume as well as big variety of data that's coming, and that's where new technology is being employed. Again, this is not the idea. Idea of new technology is not to take people out of their jobs, but it is to help them focus on the right thing, which is, patient safety and product risk.
Correct.
Instead of on paperwork, because you have so much more to do, you might as well focus your time on the right things rather than on inputting data which can be done by machines. So that's where we're looking at new technology for consuming data, for looking at variety of data, for analyzing data, for looking at signals within that data, for looking at automated ways of doing things which are repeated. Right? It's like anything. I'm sure you've said on the medical side, machines can read scans and MRIs better nowadays for cancer detection than human beings on a pure numbers basis. So that's where you need to use medicines. You need to use technology to help humans focus on the right areas. And that's what we're doing. So we're looking at new tech into this area to allow this industry to consume this data, variety and size, and then allow people to focus in the right direction. Such that, again, this objective is still the same, which is to improve patient safety.
Very interesting. So, you're also doing a lot of work on medicines and talking about the efficacy of medicines. And we do also know that a very large portion of medicines sold in our country are either fake or underpowered.
Yeah.
What, in your opinion, is the answer to solve this big problem?
So I think, whether we like it or not, right? And this is human nature, and this is true for humans across the world. This is not India or otherwise. It's regulations are very important, right? The regulatory framework has to be strong. First of all, it has to be relevant. It has to be practical, and we know this is true for anything, whether it's taxation, whether it is any other field of life. The regulatory framework, once it gets strong, and when people know that there is certain norms to be adhered to, and that there is a huge penalty for not doing so, that's when the journey starts, right? Okay. And in India, for good or bad reason, we have not yet reached there. We have laws, we have regulations, but they're not, for example, on drug safety, where we talk about safety, we talk less about efficacy, we will talk about more about safety.
Right.
I mean, the laws are, if you look at the Indian laws, they're about like 0.5% of a FDA or an EMA or a PMDA in Japan in terms of the amount of compliance that those companies have to go through. And even our companies, when they sell abroad, they have to go through the same compliance.
Sure.
Because they're selling to the patients abroad. So I believe starting point certainly is regulations. It has to be very strong. Second is technology. There is, if you look at, for example, even on the medicine shops, a lot of times the chemist or the pharmacist doesn't know whether the thing is expired, the medicine expired. Or if he, for example, has a dashboard to know aging of all the drugs on his shelf.
Yeah.
he can then release the ones that are older first. Now, this information, how does he know? A lot of times they don't. There is no system in these stores. There's no software system to be able to tell you or track your inventory. There isn't a software system to track inventory to distributors, for example, so that you can immediately inform them that, look, I'm running short of this. So automatically this comes in the next day.
Correct.
These are the things that I think regulations, technology, and third is just pure awareness. And I think digital media helps because you can then spread a message much faster. Hopefully, positive messages, not the negative ones, but positive messages can also spread very fast using digital technology and awareness. And the millennials are much more aware. The other day, we had a case of a COVID in our complex, and I happened to lead the task force to take care of all protocols. Now this lady came, this was like 18-year-old. She came and started challenging me, like, why are you doing this? Why are you not doing that? Why can't you tell me the name of the patient? I'm like, all right, good questions. But what it told me was that the awareness levels are extremely high in the new generation.
Absolutely right.
They don't care about experience and hierarchy and age and all that. So that I think is also going to help because people are going to challenge status quo.
Correct.
So I think the combination of these three things: technology, regulations, digital media, and awareness of the new generation. I think these will combine to solve this kind of quality issues.
Very interesting. So let me move on. You're a startup entrepreneur. I've got one question for you on that. A lot of people write to me and ask me.
Sure.
The question is, what are some of the basic mistakes a lot of startup entrepreneurs make?
And a lot of times I take analogy of sports, right? Because I'm a big fan of sports, follow sports, and I draw a lot of analogies from sport into life and business. There is always more time to play a ball than you think you have, right? I think this is something that people tend to, because they don't realize that or are too anxious, they tend to think that this is it. In the next 6 months, I have to knock the ball out of the park, and that's achieve everything in 6 months. I was just reading the documentary the other day of Ginsburg. She retired at 87, right? And she actually didn't even retire. She passed away when she was still in office.
Correct.
At what age, right? So imagine the runway you have. The runway you have is much, much longer than you think that there is, whether on your own life, internally, or even from a market perspective. Market is also not going anywhere. Remember that. So I'm not saying be lackadaisical or be lazy about achieving goals, but there is always more time than you think there is to achieve things and to react. So when you know that, you react better. You don't react in a hurry, right? You wait and you react in a measured fashion. I think that's one area. I also think of course, I must have been like that also in the beginning. It's too much external focus. What are the outside world thinking? What's the customer saying all the time? Yes. What's the market saying all the time? Yes. Very important. But so long we have to focus on your core as well, because ultimately what you are is a function of what is inside your organization. So internal focus, I think, sometimes I've seen entrepreneurs being too aggressive with people, too pushy, too demanding, without putting in the right cultural values within the organization to become an outfit that kind of go and fight the world. I've read a great book. I was reading a great book by Paddy Upton, who was the assistant coach when India won the World Cup. That's what he talks about. He talks about having a very strong internal culture to capture the outside world. You can't capture outside if you're not strong inside.
Very true. Very true.
So these are the few things I would say that I have seen.
Okay. So Pravin, I have time for 2 or 3 questions for you personally.
Sure.
My first question is that what is your source of inspiration to do so many good things?
I don't know whether it's been good things or no, but what I do know is that what I've at least seen and observed is that when you start adding value to people internally and externally, you generally do good things. I mean, for example, making profits is not a bad thing, right? You make profits. What does that help, right? It helps, let's say I used to employ 300 people in my previous company. 300 people means to me 1,200 people, when you add the families. And then you add the indirect thing, it creates a massive amount of satisfaction and employment. So to me, our country needs more and more and more of that, because I think that's the only way for us to make progress, as we saw when we talk about China and all these wars. The only way to fight all this is economic strength. There is no other strength. Of course, cultural thing and all are important, but there is, other than economic strength, there is nothing that is important. And how do you build economic strength? Is by continuing to add, create companies that can add value to the customer, internal, India, global, doesn't even matter. You're adding value and through that value addition, you're getting people from where they are to a different level, and that constantly keeps me inspired because we are adding value to the country, we're adding value to the business space that we are working in. Of course, and the area that you pick also is sometimes important. It should drive you, right? Area we work in, I believe, is very close to me, at least. So because I believe that we create value for people who are in need, the patients. What we do has a direct impact on patient safety. One mistake we make can result in some patient consuming a wrong medicine.
Sure.
So that kind of thing also helps in keeping the motivation levels high.
Next question to you is what does success mean to you?
I mean, of course, success definitions have changed over a period of time. I mean, I used to think success in a lot in monetary terms, and in terms of material acquisitions. And of course, when you look at the times that we are living in, you gain a slightly better perspective, right? And that better perspective tells you that there are other things that are important, and not just the material benefits. So to me, really, I mean, I think success, if I can take 100 people and get them from point X to point Y in their journey of life.
Right.
To me, that is success. Because then I know that those 100 guys are going to add, exponentially more value when we add that. So to me, if I can grow that and through that add value to the market, to me that is success.
Okay.
Right? And to me, that is good enough to be happy in what we do.
Okay. And my last question to you is, how are you rethinking your own life given the new normal with the pandemic?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've certainly realized, and I used to be, of course, in entrepreneurial settings, you're always in any, I mean, even in your professional lives, people are very busy, and you don't necessarily sit back or and think. So are there other parts of your life that you need to deal with? So that has helped. I mean, we've been lucky that we are in a business where we can operate from our homes. Extremely privileged, but that also has shown me different part of life that I was missing in terms of the family and how much time and how much care that you can provide to your family by just being there. I'm not even saying you have to do much extra. Just being there is enough to give your family a lot more other things that they were otherwise missing. So I just believe that you got to look at you call it work-life balance, whatever name you got to balance it out. I think that's what it's telling us.
Okay.
That take things in perspective. There's more to life than simply office and back. So I think that has taught us. Business-wise, again, it's the same thing. You got to kind of take a step back, see how things are moving, not be in a big hurry. Learn to also survive when things are bad. You can survive when things are good. That's always an easy thing to do. But how do you survive when things are bad? When every customer is postponing projects because they want to focus on business as usual, so to say.
Sure.
So again, solidifying your internal core in that time.
Okay.
Because otherwise you never get time to solidify those things.
Correct.
So those are a couple of things I would say from personal side as well as from professional front.
Terrific. Pravin, thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I wish you lots of success. Thanks,
Ashutosh. Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.